So Doc, what I've noticed that with clients and folks that I work with, they will come to me, and certain folks fall into this interesting category where literally they're doing everything wrong. Right. You know, on the dietary side, is like if they eat fruit, it's bananas, and they're usually brown bananas, like the highest glycemic load stuff that they can find,
with sugar on them.
With sugar on them. Yeah. And then similarly, when they have problems with sleep, they are doing everything wrong. Right. And so we start trying to educate them about this process called sleep hygiene. I know you talk about this constantly. What is sleep hygiene, and kind of what are your checklists or conceptual ideas about getting sleep hygiene right so that we get better sleep and that's an easier process?
Yeah. So this is, of course, a very large topic, and there's no end to the list that you could say, you know, this step is something that could help you wind down to go to sleep. And I encourage people to go to Google and type in sleep hygiene and look for tips, and there are thousands of them. But they all kind of hinge around two things. But I always preface this with, if you've ever had kids, or if you've ever been a kid, you will probably recognize that there was some sort of bedtime ritual around kids going to sleep. That should never go away, but of course, as adults, we don't do that anymore. That's really what sleep hygiene is, right? So when you're setting up your kid to go to sleep, you know, after a certain amount of time, you know, at a certain time of the day, you aren't going to let your kid watch television or, you know, juggle chainsaws or whatever else you let them do that, you know, might stimulate them, because it's time to wind down. And then there's going to be a bedtime, and then there's going to be putting on jammies, and there's going to be, you know, reading a book, and then there's going to, you know, story time, whatever. There's going to be some ritualization of this, and it's really it's a protracted period of time where you're getting your kid ready to go to sleep. Adults need exactly the same thing, and there's two reasons for that. So most of the time when people talk about sleep hygiene, they focus on light saturation. So for those of you who don't know, our brains are meant to and trained to the sun coming up and down based on how much light is entering our eyes, and specifically blue light is the big trigger, which is why there's all these devices around there and electronics to get rid of blue light. So essentially what happens is when the sun goes down, if you look at even modern day hunter-gatherer sort of paleo type cultures, they go to sleep about 3.5 hours after the sun goes down, because once the sun goes down, that starts a cascade of events that ultimately results in your brain secreting a hormone called melatonin, which most people are familiar with as being associated with sleep. That's one of the pathways. And so if you have light in your eyes right up until the time you go to bed, you haven't done that cascade of events. You're not producing melatonin, which is essential. Now, melatonin is one hormone that gets secreted, but there are literally hundreds of changes that are going on in your, what we call your lizard brain, or your old brain, the mammalian brain that every animal on this planet has. And then we have that big wrinkly mass on top, the neocortex, which is what makes us human and the smartest animal on the planet. But it's also how we interact with our environment. So one of the things that happens when the light goes down and all of those cascade of events happens is we secrete GABA, and GABA goes into the neocortex and it kind of slows it down. It makes it harder for all of those nerves to fire. And those nerves are those neurons are what are allowing us to perceive our environment and interact with our environment. So me moving my hand is being done by my neocortex, knowing where it's at and purposefully doing it. Sort of the definition of sleep is, or part of the definition of sleep is that there's a barrier between you and your environment. So that neocortex has to be kind of shut off or, slowed down. And that's what that pre-sleep stage feels like. So the other component, apart from just light saturation, is that you have to slow your brain down. So even if you're wearing, great blue blocking sunglasses and you have F-Lux on your computer, but you're cranking on emails until 9:59 and you get in bed at 10 and go, why am I not asleep?
Right.
It's because your brain is still completely awake. I often give the metaphor of, almost everybody's had the experience of going to work or school or something and being exhausted and thinking the entire day that as soon as
My head hits the pillow, I'm out.
As soon as work's over, I'm going home and going to sleep at 5 p.m. tonight, and I'm going to sleep till the next day. And then one of your friends talks you into going to happy hour. You have a couple of drinks, which are CNS depressants, should make you feel more tired, but all of a sudden your brain starts waking up because you've just stimulated yourself with the environment, with the noise, with checking out the opposite sex, with your conversation with your friends and all that stuff. And you've overridden one of those major components. So your brain could be cranking out everything it should to say, let's go to sleep, let's go to sleep, let's go to sleep. But your neocortex is going, no, this is fun. There's all this excitement around me and I'm going to engage with that. So all sleep hygiene really hinges around slowing down activity around the brain, which we're doing with the kids, right? Decreasing your interaction with your environment, and then doing everything that you can to decrease that light saturation. And that's what getting rid of the electronics in the room is about. That's what, wearing gaming glasses or something to block blue light, or putting programs on your computers to block blue light. That's what all of that light saturation stuff is about. So it's really just those two components. And you can skin that cat, as you say, a million ways,
right?
For each one of those aspects, but you have to have both of those in place.
So just to recap, really important to have some sort of a ritualized process of winding down, and that includes both minimizing light exposure, but also minimizing kind of cognitive stimulation.
And so, a lot of people with insomnia, I would say probably the most common insomnia, which is just simply a medical word for difficulty sleeping. The most common cause of insomnia is people getting into bed with a really active brain, and they just lay there and they start thinking about everything they have to do and everything they've done wrong and every risk and every possible thing, like they're just sort of worry machines or planning machines or whatever, and they're just keeping themselves awake. Then after you do that enough, and you start sleep depriving yourself, that'll lead to you being more anxious, and then you'll be worrying even more, and then eventually you'll start worrying about not able to sleep, and then you won't be able to sleep because you're worried about not being able to go to sleep, and then it's a self-propagating downward spiral from there.
Great.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.